All right, let's get right into this. What we're about to explore is a look deep inside a really disturbing psychological case file. This is a story that pushes the boundaries of what we understand, seriously blurring the lines between profound mental trauma and, well, what some might even call the paranormal.
So, where are we getting all this? It's coming straight from the clinical notes of one Dr. Tennilious. We're going to be examining the case file for a young woman, identified only as Samantha D. We're going to walk through this file step by step, exactly as it was documented.
And right off the bat, here's the statement that just stops you in your tracks. A confession, apparently delivered without any real emotion. Samantha D is claiming she killed her boyfriend, not because she wanted to, but because a voice inside her head commanded her to. This is the central mystery we're trying to unpack here.
To even begin to understand Samantha's state of mind, we have to go back. The case file points us directly to her family history, and more specifically, to her father. There was an event that really seems to set the stage for a whole lifetime of trauma. It all starts with this jarring memory from Samantha's childhood. In the middle of the night, a violent struggle just erupts from her parents' bedroom.
The kids hear it all. The crashing, the wrestling, just the unmistakable sounds of a chaotic and absolutely terrifying fight.
You know, it was a desperate physical struggle against something or someone. But here's the thing. They'd soon find out there was nobody else in that room.
And all that chaos ends with the sound of a window shattering. And then, just this abrupt, unnerving silence.
Let's look at the father's own words from the file. He said he was paralyzed, that he could see an invisible imprint of fingers on his wife. He claims he fought this shapeless thing like a fuzzy black shadow, and in a moment of just pure rage, he threw it out the window. For him, this wasn't some nightmare. It was a real physical battle.
Okay, so from a clinical perspective, this is where we need to talk about environmental trauma. Whether what the father saw was real or not, the events in Samantha's home created this constant atmosphere of fear and instability, and that, without a doubt, would have a huge impact on her psychological development.
And believe me, it didn't end there. It was like one thing after another. Samantha actually found her father shooting up heroin. That discovery led to a really ugly divorce, which ended with her father in what she described as a drug-fueled rage like a possessed demon, just completely destroying their family home. This forced Samantha, her mom, and her siblings to flee and hide in a family refuge.
So now the file brings us to that family refuge, and it's here that a little bit of childhood curiosity seems to open a new and much more direct doorway to whatever was going on in Samantha's life.
While staying at the refuge, Samantha and a friend decide to mess around with a Ouija board, and what starts out as just a game, well, it escalates fast. As you can see, the planchette literally flies out from under their fingers. Then it starts spelling out names, before it just gets stuck, relentlessly spelling death and die over and over again. And just when they pull their hands away, terrified, it gets so much worse. The case file notes that this deep, guttural growl just fills the room, seeming to come from nowhere. It wasn't just a sound. They said it was physical, something they could feel vibrating through the floor and right up into their bodies.
And you really have to hear it in Samantha's own words to get how terrifying this was. This wasn't just being scared. She's describing a profound physiological terror that left them basically incapacitated, struggling to even move their limbs to escape the room.
Okay, this next part of the file is genuinely unsettling. After they finally managed to flee the room, the Ouija board just disappeared. Sometime later, after they'd moved into a new house, Samantha found it. It was inexplicably packed away in her own backpack, almost as if it had followed her. Absolutely terrified, she took it and threw it into the crawl space under the house. But here's the thing, throwing the board away didn't work. In fact, this is the moment where everything changes. The phenomenon shifts from something happening outside of her to something happening deep inside her. This is the absolute core of her psychological file.
This is really the crucial point, the part that's so hard to wrap your head around. Samantha started hearing whispers, and she said they seemed to come from the floorboards where she'd thrown the board. But here's the key. The voice sounded exactly like her own, but the thoughts, the words, they were not hers. What started as little suggestions quickly morphed into relentless, intrusive demands.
And those demands became horrifically specific. One night, her boyfriend was over for dinner, and the voice gave its first explicit, violent command. The file marks this as a critical turning point.
the moment the internal whispers became a very, very real threat.
So what do you do when a voice in your head is telling you to do something terrible? Samantha's solution was, well, it was this twisted prank. She would lick the dull back of a kitchen knife to make it warm and wet, sneak up behind her boyfriend, and run it across his throat. It was a terrifying rehearsal, an attempt to satisfy the voice without actually doing it.
And that brings us to the final and most tragic section of the case file, the part where the rehearsal becomes real.
According to her testimony, she went to do the prank one last time. Only this time, she says she used the sharp edge of the blade. She felt that same warm liquid, but in her disconnected state, she thought it was saliva, just like all the other times. The realization didn't hit her until she saw the look of absolute terror on his face and the blood pouring from his neck. The irreversible act was done, and she just stood there in shock as he died in front of her.
And that brings us to today. Samantha is now in a mental health facility where she's being held for long-term observation and rehabilitation. And it's there that Dr. Tennilious has been documenting her story. A story that, according to the file, has never once changed.
So we're left with this enormous, unsettling question. Was Samantha the victim of some kind of paranormal entity? Something that was unleashed by family trauma and a Ouija board? Or is this a truly tragic case of severe psychosis, where a mind that was fractured by trauma created its own powerful, commanding delusion? Was it a demon in the house, or was it a demon of the mind? That's what the case file leaves us to wonder.
Welcome back to another deep dive. I mean, you are here because you want to bypass all that information overload and just get straight to the profound aha moments, right?
Exactly. And today's topic is definitely going to deliver on that.
It really is. I want you to imagine just standing at your kitchen sink. You're washing dishes after a totally normal, mundane family dinner.
Right. The water's running, plates are clinking.
Yeah, just everyday stuff. And suddenly, your own internal voice, like the exact same voice you use to read a book or think through a math problem, tells you to grab a chef's knife and kill the person standing right behind you.
God, it's chilling just hearing you say it.
Right, but you do it. Today, we are opening a case file where a 14-year-old girl faced that exact terrifying reality. We're going to explore how she, got to that kitchen sink in the first place.
It is an incredibly heavy document to process. It sits right at this really chilling intersection between a reported haunting and a complete psychological breakdown.
Yeah, and today's source material is titled The Whispers of a Possessed Mind. Specifically, we're looking at Case File 7 from the office of a child psychologist named Dr. Eliza Tennilious.
And the subject is a young girl. We'll use her pseudonym, Samantha D.
Right, Samantha. And she is recounting her story from a mental health facility. Why is she there?
Yeah.
Because she actually murdered her high school boyfriend.
But she claims she didn't act alone.
Exactly. She insists there were entities involved. Our mission today is to really unpack that horrific connection between extreme childhood trauma and these reported paranormal experiences.
We need to look at how domestic violence, severe drug abuse, and just a totally fractured home life can manifest to a kid as literal demons.
Yeah.
And to set the tone, we really have to look at how Samantha delivers this narrative to the doctor.
Oh, the clinical notes are wild here.
Yeah, they describe her recounting this horrific violent event with just a completely straight face, like a profound lack of emotion.
Like she's reading the phone book.
Exactly. She delivers it like a script she's been forced to recite 1,000 times. The doctor even notes there's a sarcastic, witty slap in her voice.
It's the voice of someone who's already decided that you aren't going to believe her anyway. Because she's locked up under constant supervision, and her reality is just so far removed from a normal childhood.
It sounds like a horror movie.
It really does.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. The origin point for all of this chaos is her father.
Yeah, the inciting incident of her childhood. Samantha remembers waking up in the middle of the night to these massive, violent sounds coming from her parents' bedroom.
Right. The source document has these intense sensory details. She describes it as, quote, boom, crash, struggle, wrestling, wailing, thud, and smash.
And her father claimed he was fighting off an invisible entity. He said it was holding him down on the bed.
And he gave it a very specific description, didn't he? It wasn't just a generic ghost.
No, not at all. He described it as a grubby, fuzzy, black shadow. And he said it smelled strongly of burnt matches.
So weirdly specific.
Yeah. He even claimed he saw this invisible entity leave a handprint on his wife's leg that looked like it was made of solid glass.
Oh, wow. And his reaction to this thing is just extreme. He essentially performs this violent, aggressive exorcism right there in the bedroom.
Right. He engages in a literal physical grapple with thin air. He puts his head down like he's in a rugby scrum and lunges toward the bedroom window.
Just totally unhinged.
Totally. He punches the window, completely shatters the glass, and just screams pure vulgarities out into the night to banish the entity.
And then he turns to his terrified kids and tells them he just fought off a demon.
Yeah, that's what he tells them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because later on, the reality of what was actually haunting that house comes to light.
A much darker reality.
Right. After the family finally moves out, Samantha goes back with her dad to check the old house for stuff they left behind. She climbs up into the dark attic, probably thinking she's going to find old toys or hidden treasure like a kid in the Goonies.
But
Instead, she finds her father and his friend in the dark, with their pants around their ankles, shooting heroin into each other's legs.
it is just a completely devastating, reality-breaking revelation for a child to stumble into.
Seriously. And I need to push back on Samantha's initial paranormal narrative here. Was the father's quote-unquote possession actually just a literal projection of his severe drug-induced psychosis?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a terrifying shadowy demon that smells like a burnt match. That is almost a perfect literal metaphor for heroin addiction.
It really is.
Think about when you stub your toe really hard
Yeah.
and you get so irrationally angry that you yell at the coffee table like it maliciously attacked you.
Right, projecting your pain.
Exactly. Take that basic human instinct to project internal pain onto external things and magnify it by 1,000 through the lens of a psychotic, drug-induced rage. Isn't that what the father's doing?
Yes. And Samantha internalized that paranormal explanation because believing in a ghost is somehow easier for a child to process than accepting you have a monstrous, addicted parent.
A ghost is an external threat. A parent is supposed to be safe.
Right. That is exactly the core psychological mechanism at work here. And his behavior only reinforces that narrative for her. Like, look at the climax of her parents' relationship.
The incident with the trophy case.
Yeah. The father shows up at their new house on a random Thursday after a very bitter separation. Samantha looks through the peephole and notes that he has a darkened face.
She actually explicitly says it wasn't her dad's face anymore.
Exactly. He walks in without a word, goes straight to the family's prized pink trophy case, which holds all of the girls' childhood memories and achievements, and punches straight through the thick glass.
And he doesn't just break it, he obliterates it.
Obliterates it. And it's not just about the glass breaking, it's the symbolism. He's looking at his children, standing in front of their proudest childhood memories, and violently shattering them.
Destroying their past and their safety in one punch.
Oh, yes. Then he proceeds to trash the entire house like a cyclone. The text literally describes him acting like a possessed demon from hell, tearing down bookshelves while the whole neighborhood watches.
And the absolute worst part is the aftermath. After acting like a monster hunting for souls and drugs, he was never charged.
Never. Just walked away.
He never faced justice. And that taught Samantha a really dangerous, deep-seated lesson, didn't it?
It taught her that destructive, uncontrollable, violent forces can invade your safe space at any time, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop them.
Wow. Because to a child, the parent is the environment. When the environment turns violent and unpredictable, it's like the weather turning supernatural.
You completely defenseless against a hurricane.
Right, just like she was defenseless against her dad.
Yeah.
So to escape this very real monster, Samantha's mother, Nellie, takes Samantha and her younger brother, Michael, and flees into hiding at a family refuge.
And this refuge becomes this really bizarre liminal space for Samantha.
She meets a girl there named Tiffany, and the whole environment is just thick with these wild, distorted stories from the other kids.
The refuge lore is fascinating to analyze. These kids swap incredibly vivid, almost mythical tales. Like, Tiffany tells Samantha about a teen boy whose body was cut in half by a shark and sewn back together.
And they actually go look at a scar on a boy's stomach as proof, right?
Yeah, they do. And there are stories about a kid with a pet tapeworm he regurgitates, and a heavily pregnant mother who had the superhuman strength to throw an abusive man entirely across a room.
It's literally trauma disguised as superhero origin stories. I mean, why do traumatized kids invent these specific types of myths?
It's a psychological mechanism for reclaiming power. These kids are living in such extreme, helpless circumstances that their baseline for reality is totally warped.
So they make up stories where they have control.
Exactly. By telling stories about surviving shark attacks or having superhuman strength, they are fantasy role-playing survival. They're trying to convince themselves that if the worst happens, they can survive it too.
But the flip side is that in this highly charged environment, the line between fantasy and reality just completely dissolves.
It really does, which leads directly into the paranormal stuff.
Right. Samantha and Tiffany start talking about seeing dark shadows and hearing voices in empty rooms, and this leads them to steal a spirit board, a Ouija board, from an older teen boy at the refuge named Peter.
They take it into a dark room, light a candle, and ask it to spell their names.
The planchette spells Samantha, Tiffany, Peter, and then it rapidly spells death, die, death.
And the physical phenomena they report experiencing next is really intense. The planchette allegedly flies off the board into the darkness.
Which is terrifying enough.
But then they try it again with the lights on. The board spells death again, the planchette flies off again, but this time a low, guttural growl vibrates through the floorboards.
Samantha describes it as a demon dog from hell rumbling up through their souls.
Yeah, the lights flash on and off, the curtains blow wildly, and the girls just absolutely scramble out of the room in pure terror.
They think they're done with it. The board goes missing. They figure Peter just took it back. But later, when Samantha is unpacking her backpack at her brand new family home, the place that is supposed to be safe, there it is.
The spirit board and the planchette are inexplicably sitting right in her bag.
She is utterly terrified. She finds this little access door that leads under her new house, and she violently throws the board into the darkness. She says she flicked the planchette into the dark like a ninja star and latched the door shut.
It's a very visceral, physical reaction to an object of absolute fear.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Look at the irony of her throwing that board away like a weapon, like a ninja star. She's trying to physically throw away her trauma.
She's shoving it into the dark foundation of her home.
Exactly, under her home, and literally locking the latch. But you can't just latch a door on psychological baggage, can you?
You certainly cannot. The board is rotting under the house, just exactly like the trauma of her father's violence is buried in her subconscious. You can't just lock it away and expect it to stay quiet.
No, it always finds a way out.
If we analyze the transition from the chaotic family home to the refuge, we see a child vibrating with unspent adrenaline. When Samantha and Tiffany steal that board, the text notes they were bitter with excitement.
Bitter with excitement, that's a strong phrase.
It is. The adrenaline of rebellion, the fear of the unknown, that extreme emotional fuel born directly from her trauma was seeking an outlet. It lit the board with action. When a kid's psychological state is that highly charged, they inadvertently invite the darkness of their own mind to take a physical shape.
And trauma absolutely does not stay quiet in the dark, because almost immediately after she locks that door, the floorboards right above it start speaking to her.
The whispers.
Yes, Samantha starts hearing voices emanating directly from the floorboards right where she trapped the spirit board. But there is a crucial, heartbreaking distinction she makes in her retelling.
This is maybe the most important part of the file.
She says, and I quote, "The voice inside my head was my own. The thoughts that voice invoked were not thoughts of my own."
What's fascinating here is the profound psychological fracturing taking place.
Wait, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around this. If she explicitly knows the voice in her head is her own, how can a 14-year-old's brain hold both of those realities at once?
It's complicated, I know.
If she knew it was her own internal monologue, why did she still genuinely believe a demon under the floorboards was making her do things?
Because her trauma, the domestic violence, the instability, the terror of her father's drug-fueled rages has just become way too heavy for her psyche to bear. So her mind creates an other.
Another.
Yes, it manifests this external entity beneath the floorboards to carry the burden of these dark, violent, intrusive thoughts. By believing the demands are coming from a ghost or a demon, she is subconsciously protecting her core self from the terrifying reality of her own deteriorating mental state.
Oh, I see. If the monster is under the house, then the monster isn't her.
Exactly. Even if she recognizes the sound of the voice, she has to disown the source of the thoughts just to survive.
It's like a sinister ventriloquist act happening inside her own mind. The trauma she suffered is the ventriloquist, and it's using Samantha's own familiar voice as the dummy to suggest these absolutely unthinkable things.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Think about your own inner monologue for a second. When you're stressed, you talk to yourself, right? Now imagine that familiar voice aggressively, relentlessly demanding that you do something horrific.
And you're so broken by your past that you genuinely believe the source of that demand is a demon.
It's terrifying. And the voices start as suggestions, but they quickly escalate into relentless bullying demands. They demand entry, entertainment, lust, and they demand to feed.
Acting like a bully daring a child, and this relentless internal bullying brings us right to the tragic climax of the file.
Yeah. Samantha's now 14 years old. She invites one of her first high school boyfriends over to her new house for dinner. He meets her mom, they eat, and everything is incredibly safely normal.
Just a standard teenage evening.
Right. After dinner, she is asked to take the plates to the kitchen sink. And this is the moment. She's standing at the sink doing a totally mundane household chore, and her eyes lock onto a large black-handled chef's knife.
The voice hits her like a lightning bolt.
It drops all pretense of being a whisper and just delivers a flat, emotionless command. Grab the knife and slit his throat. Slit his throat now.
Do it. She is completely compelled to act. The pressure of the command is overwhelming, but she's still in there fighting it, so she tries to find a loophole.
Right, because she doesn't actually want to hurt him. So she initiates what becomes a highly dangerous, repeated prank.
It's so hard to read this part.
She sneaks up behind him, but before she makes contact, she licks the back, blunt side of the knife, so her saliva mimics the feeling of warm moisture.
Yeah.
Then she grabs his head, drags the blunt, wet side of the blade across his throat, and watches the shock in his eyes as he momentarily believes he's been cut. Then she pulls away, giggles, and just passes it off as a dark, twisted joke.
And the clinical file notes, she performs this specific trick multiple times over a period of weeks.
Yes, she does it repeatedly. She admits she was compelled by temptation, driven by this desperate need to give the voice what it wanted.
She hoped that if she mimicked the violence, if she fed the entity a simulation of the act, the relentless harassment would finally stop.
But why did she keep doing it? I mean, why repeat a simulation of murder?
Well, because every time you perform a mock version of a trauma, you are essentially entering a dissociative state. You are numbing yourself. You're breaking down the brain's natural, healthy aversion to extreme violence.
Which explains how the prank ultimately became reality. The final time she performs the prank, the illusion drops. She sneaks up behind him, uses the knife, and expects the warm trail of her saliva on his neck.
But this time,
the warmth doesn't fade to room temperature. She feels hot liquid flowing over her hands. She looks up, confused, literally thinking the roof is leaking warm water. Then she looks at her boyfriend. His face is pale white, his eyes are wide with terror, and he's holding his neck. Dark red blood is bubbling out from between his fingers and pooling on the kitchen floor.
it's horrific.
She looks at her bloody hand, frozen in pure shock, and realizes, quote, "Oh my God, I've killed my first love."
It is a devastating, irreversible moment of psychological surrender. She didn't just physically slip. Her psyche finally surrendered to the compulsion she had been flirting with for weeks.
So what does this all mean? How do we make sense of this tragedy?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can draw a direct, tragic line from her father's untamed rages to Samantha's violent climax at the kitchen sink.
From the bedroom to the kitchen.
Exactly. Think back to the very beginning of our discussion. Her father fought his invisible entity, which was his demons, his addiction, with extreme outward violence, smashing windows and screaming.
Right, and in his twisted narrative, he survived.
Yes, he vanquished his ghost. Samantha, carrying the environmental weight of that violence, tried to appease her own invisible entity through mock violence. But she was a child, overwhelmed by trauma, and her attempt ended in a devastating loss of life and her long-term institutionalization.
The father's unpunished violence basically set the exact blueprint for his daughter's inescapable tragedy.
It's an incredibly heavy blueprint to inherit.
It really is. To wrap up our journey today, we've watched how a child's early exposure to domestic violence, severe drug abuse, and utter chaos didn't just cause sadness. It morphed into a terrifying, all-consuming paranormal narrative,
The real-world monsters her father brought into the house took root in her subconscious.
turning her own internal voice into a demonic demand for blood. She couldn't lock the trauma under the floorboards because the trauma had already become the house she was living in.
And while this specific case file is an extreme example, it serves as a profound reminder for all of us. It highlights exactly how deeply our environments shape our inner realities.
It really does make you evaluate things.
The stories we are told and the chaos we are subjected to literally wire our perception of the world and our own internal dialogues. It underscores why early intervention is critical and why we have to help kids separate internal trauma from external reality before the lines blur entirely.
It makes you evaluate the weight of the environments we create and the things we expose children to.
This raises an important question, though, doesn't it, about the nature of the voices we all hear inside our own heads.
It does. We're going to leave you with one final, lingering thought to ponder as you go about your day. Think about what Samantha said. The voice was her own, but the thoughts were not.
Yeah.
If our environment shapes our inner monologue to that extreme of a degree, where exactly does the trauma end and the true self begin? Who is really speaking when you talk to yourself in the dark?
A truly terrifying thought to leave on.
Catch you next time.